Perfect. Hi everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining. I hope my screen is visible. We are going to yeah. Thanks. Okay. So in the last session, mostly what we understood is when it comes to the database, we can have so-called synonyms using which we can consume the any other data containers database component as well. At the same point in time, we should also be aware of what we are talking about right now is a CAP model where we are going to discuss CDS plus Node.js, right? So that particular Node.js flavor where it will come into picture and all those stuff we should be aware about. So for example, if I say I do have a, let's just say, um, application that I am developing and I would like to go with some sort of entity definition. There can be certain places, there can be certain use cases where I might need to add my set of logic rather than going with a standard REST API. Okay, so as a part of which what we might end up doing is we might end up looking for some placeholders, some hooks, some handlers where we can add our own set of logic. So during different phase of execution, our own logic can be plugged. Right. So for example, if I say, I have created an entity called assessment, and here I do have set of a field. There are certain virtual field like we have in ABAP. Okay. At the same point in time, if I have defined an entity with CDS persistence script, it is an entity which is defined on top of a structure. Okay, it means it's not going to create any underlying database table. So for this as well, we might need something called an ABAP placeholder, or I can say a Node.js placeholder, controller placeholder for this that helps us with the operation that we are looking for. In order for us to do that, as we can see in the controller service, what we did is we define an entity, okay, over here. You can define any entity over here. Example, output data that was connected to a structure-based entity. We define this one that is connected to my DB-based entities. In order for me to define the relevant controller implementation, either I can keep the name of these two files same, just the extension of the file should be changed, or if I want, if my file name is different, I can simply say @impl and I can give the path of my controller file, and that's how the these things will be connected. On top of it, for example, I'll simply say uh, in the controller, I can have different places where I can write my logic. So for example, if I am saying I would like to read the data, as it does not have the output data entity does not have underlying DB architecture, DB layer, we can simply say on read operation, I would like to let's just say execute this set of function. Okay, when we say on, it's as good as overriding the execution. When we say before, it means it will execute this code block before execution of any of the let's just say final execution cycle. So this is kind of a before hook. Before a real execution happen, you would like to plug something in, or you would like to do some sort of a validation. Okay, that's where you ideally go with a before handler. After is something after all the operation has been performed, you would like to perform either some enrichment, or in case of create, you would like to do some post update activity. That's where you ideally go with after handler as well. Okay, and I can have different, or I can say multiple before handler, multiple after handlers. I can say I can have multiple handlers for the same operation as well. Three things will specify: the operation that we are going to perform, the resource onto which we are going to perform the operation, and the handler for that. Okay. Now, as a part of which, what we also understood is I can have set of a custom validation. For example, I am doing, right, as we mentioned, purpose of before is to ensure during the create phase or update phase, data is quite valid. During the read phase, if I would like, I can also pass certain thing on top of whatever has been passed on to the query. There can be different reasons, different use cases for me to use the before handler, right? So in case of create, I'll use before handler to validate data even before they have, that has been pushed onto the database. Okay. So what we also found is if I would like to do some sort of a validation, I can do it like this. Other than that, if there are certain mandatory thing, I can also do it using @mandatory, which will also help me marking certain fields saying, okay, these are mandatory information. If I would like to add some sort of a range saying, for example, my days plan should not exceed, or I can say should not be less than 7, I can simply specify a range over there as well. Okay. So this is how we started using the handlers. Now, let's say I would like to deep deep I would like to deep dive into this, maybe perform some more operations using which I can, let's just say, perform few more operation which are controller intensive, right? So for example, simply saying I have a set of information called this particular virtual fields, and I would like to add some sort of a logic so that this information over here can be calculated. Okay, let's just try to execute my service for the first time today to see, okay, what is the situation. Okay, I'll simply, okay, have we already deployed this? Not really, right? We don't see NP, I can say node packages as well over here. Okay, let's just try to connect this to some sort of a DB module. So at least we are able to persist the data. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply say npm install. Okay, and we'll simply try to create a DB artifact for this. I'll just simply say CDS deploy to HANA. Have we added HANA artifact to it yet? No, really, right? So let's just try to add the HANA artifact. Okay, I'll just simply say CDS add HANA to it. Okay, I'll just say npm install and I'll add the HANA relevant package. I'll just say HANA database. We would have got the HANA component, right? And I'll simply say npm install @SAP HANA client. Okay. Other than that, what else do we have? So we are currently not anyway looking for some security aspect, but if we need, we can also add that. Anyway, that's for the future perspective, passport and access security. Okay, and maybe for the deployment perspective that will come at the end, we'll also keep the empty added. So that's something which we can use going forward. Now, we have to ensure that we are login with, let's just say, yeah, so we have that particular thing in place. Okay, now we would try to create our DB interface onto my HANA. So I can going forward link that. So it's going to create my DB interface that was not created yet. So in the run configuration, we can connect to this, and going forward, we can ensure that our data is going to get placed over here. And we can get some feel of a persisted data rather than in-memory database. Maybe that's something we were using earlier. Okay. Okay. By the time it's getting, let's just say, generated, let's just understand certain thing. So for example, over here, okay, when I say I have a assessments over here, okay, that's something I am doing. I have certain thing, agenda, start date, end date. I am saying overall status. I can write some, let's just say dummy logic saying I would like to calculate some status. And I'll simply say if my, let's just say start date, end date or anything, if it is, let's just say empty right now, then maybe we can simply say if the data is in preparation. But if my due date, okay, over here is less than today's date, then definitely we can say that its overall status is overdue because my due date has already lapsed. Otherwise, we can say the things are on track. But these things might change right daily because today I'm opening this system. My due date, I can say my overall status should be, let's just say on track. But tomorrow, as the due date might lapse, I should also be saying that it has been overdue. So this information is something that I might need to recalculate rather than persisting it. Okay. And at what point in time, ideally, we should calculate those things? You would be knowing we have so-called, let's just say, virtual fields when it comes to ABAP CDS as well, right? So these are same sort of a virtual field. Virtual fields are something that we ideally calculate when we are trying to read the data. Okay, and that's the reason in case of a read operation, we'll try to influence something, right? So one thing we are clear about is that that's a read operation that we'll use in order for us to. Okay, so one thing is something we are quite clear about is that the read operation is something that we'll use for the virtual fields calculation. But in that case, the question still remains same. Should we use a before, after, or on? Okay. So as we let's just say discuss, the purpose of after is to update any column based on some custom logic. Okay. After the data has been read from the database, then we'll definitely go with so-called after handler. Okay, so our purpose will be that we'll write some sort of a after handler for the entity that has got its own data persistency, but just for this two field, it has not got any. So we'll try to ultimately write some logic so that this value of this particular two field can be calculated on an ad hoc basis. Okay, so let's see. I'll try to just connect to my run configuration over here. Okay, there is a controller which I do have, and here I haven't connected to this one. I'll just try to connect to let's just say there is the one. I mean, maybe in trial whenever it takes much time, maybe it's definitely going to fail for the very first instance. Let's see. Maybe we'll give it a minute. Okay, yeah. Now I have to do it again. Bind this one. Okay, now it seems it's connected. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll just try to simply run this. We don't want to deploy it. Okay, let's see if it's able to connect via the command line. Yeah, it has got some DB passwords. Let's just open it in a new tab. And let's just open this. Okay, it seems we have not got any data because we never created one. I'll just simply click on create, and we know all the validations and our the things are in place. So multiple errors, and we have to resolve those. Okay, so all these things are required. So for example, I'll just say AG01. Okay, and I'll just simply say, for example, today, this, tomorrow, and maybe this is something I can say. Maybe let's just say 26th days plan, which I have is, for example, 8, and I'll just simply create this. So I have got this information, but this overall status is something that you will see it's quite empty. Same goes over here. I don't see anything over here, right? So what I might do is I might simply say that the operation that I am supposed to perform needs me to get a set of a data for this particular overall status. Let's just see the influence of the handler that we are talking about. Okay, so I'll just simply say I'll just go over here and I'll say there is a custom handler that we have for the validation, which is a before handler for that. I'll just say where it is ending. Put a cursor over here. It says okay, it ends over here. I'll just say custom handler for my let's just say mm, read, but after to get the virtual field info. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll simply say SRV after, and here we'll go with the operation called read. Okay, and here we'll give the name of the entity, and entity in our case is nothing but an assessments. Okay, and here what we'll do is in this particular case, what we are saying is that particular assessments, that's something we are going to read after. Now question comes, what all thing after handler gives you ideally. So you would be remembering we have gone through standard documentation some time back, which says that after ideally gives you the set of data that has already been provided, plus a request parameter in case you would like to perform any additional operation. So I'll just simply go with data REQ over here. Okay, and here I'll just simply go with this one. So ultimately this built my block. Okay. Thanks to this, the moment I even anyway say refresh it, the system is not going to complain anything anyway. Okay, I see that these are the things that's going to appear anyway, even though I have put a handler, but I have not written a single line of code in that one as well. Okay, let's just say if we can get something out of it, I'll just say console.log. I'll simply say, for example, my data over here. I'll just simply say data. I'll refresh this. It has triggered some get call over here for sure. Let's see, is my console printing something? So it just printed this set of data, right? So there is a JSON data that you are getting, saying there is a AG01, there is an agenda, and these are the things that it contains, right? Now, these are the two fields which are empty. Okay, now if there is a JSON that you are getting, for example, into the input, and you are supposed to, or I can say you are willing to plug something as a part of it, what ideally we'll do? You will ultimately iterate on all of this, and you will try to change the set of a data in a way that your output status gets changed, right? Because these visualize these the thing that you are having in the input, whatever you change over here. So for example, if I change overall status over here to XYZ, it will start appearing as XYZ. Okay, as simple as that. So in order for me to do that, let's just simply say I would like to manipulate the data. Okay, so I'll simply say data and yeah, for those who know JavaScript, for those who do not, like we have let's just say loop at in ABAP, right? Same way in JavaScript, we have a for statement, we have for each statement likewise. Okay, what it ideally does is, so if I have a JSON, right, it means I have got multiple set of a data, right? What kind of data it is? So for example, if I click on this, you will see this is how the data will be looking alike. Okay, so this is how the data is looking alike. I would like to iterate on all the code blocks. Currently it's just one, but I can have n number of code block which might be available over here in number of data records. Okay, so I'll just simply say on data, I would like to iterate on each of the record. For each of the record, I would like to calculate my new status and I would like to pass it on. Okay, as simple as that. So what I'll do is I'll just simply say data dot for each. Okay, while you are saying for each, you will get a suggestion saying data ideally needs an array. So what is that particular array? I'll just say data itself is an array. Okay, and you can get individual record of it. So I'll just say I would like to get the record of it in the form of an item. So it's like your internal table has a work area. There is a loop element over here. You are saying data, you are iterating on it, you are getting an internal table over here, sorry, work area over here. And while you get a work area, you would perform some operation. So for example, write some logic to calculate the new status. Calculate status for this item. Okay, so because I can have 100 records, out of 100 records for each of the item, I'll write the logic to calculate the status. And whatever status I get, I'll simply write saying oh item dot overall status. So where it is over here. Just copy this property name. I'll just say item dot overall status over here, and I can call it out anything, right? So for example, I'll simply say on track. Okay, and maybe I would like to also give some sort of a color coding. So if I say my data is on track, I can say I can show it in a green. So I can say item dot my overall status. What is it? Criticality, because we have added it in the color coding. I'll simply say, for example, 3. Okay, I have manipulated the data a bit. But now this time, if I try to click on go, as you can see, it just started showing on track and green tick. Reason is okay, reason is that now you got this data over here before even you manipulated, you tried printing it. It says console.log, and after that you manipulated the data in a way that it contains full set of a data. Now, if I just try printing it again, what you will get is the manipulated data. And that's the reason this on track just went into the output, and that's why you are able to see this particular thing into the output. As you can see, now you just plugged in on track and 3 over here, which is ultimately generating the data of the column, which actually does not exist, but you calculated it at runtime. Okay, now we can calculate this thing based on any arbitrary logic we want. Okay, as simple as that. So for example, I would like to calculate some sort of a data over here, saying, let's just say, I would like to calculate some status. Okay, so I'll simply say I would like to calculate some status. So I mentioned maybe in the last session that maybe we can calculate any of the information via some sort of let's just say functions or method we want, and how we can persist those. What are the ways we can define a variables over here by using let, where, or const? We can, let's just say, call it as a let. I'll just say ls status info, and let's just say we would like to calculate some status. So I'll just say underscore because I would like to create a private method. You can name it as anything. I'm using underscore as a convention. You can omit that. You can follow your own convention. I'll just simply say calculate status, and I'll pass the whole set of a data over here. So my idea is that this particular calculate status should give me some sort of a status information. And this status information over here should give me the status specific to that particular line rather than me specifying, okay, what are those information. I can say what is the status rather than me specifying any hard coded value. Okay, so I have to define this function calculate status over here. I'll define it outside of the scope of my service implementation. So where is my service implementation? Here it is, right? So I'll define something outside of the scope. So here is the scope ending. I'll just put a cursor on this round bracket. It ends over here. So I'll define a function. Okay, I'll simply say function over here, and I'll simply say calculate status, and maybe here I might get some data. I'll just call it as a data. I can name it as anything, right? Because there is a let's just say this is not the variable that we are anyway going to use. We are going to use this only within this logic. Here it's termed as an item. Okay. Now, if I say I would like to calculate some status, let's just write some algorithmic logic saying, hey, if I my start date, end date, or due date, if they are not prepared, let me just say that they are not prepared, they are in preparation. But if let's just say my due date has already lapsed, I'll call it as an overdue, else I'll call it as an on track. As simple as that. Okay. So I'll just simply say if my let's just say start date over here. Okay. If I have not got any start date, we ideally write it in the form of a JavaScript saying, hey, this is not there. What we'll say it in above? We'll say data dot start date is initial. Here the syntax has been shortened saying not. Not means the data is not there, as good as that. Okay. I'll just say data dot end date. If it either of these things are not there, I'll simply say I am not in a position to calculate what should be my final status. I'll just say data dot due date, for example. If either of the things are not there, let's just say I would like to prepare some sort of a JSON data. You can generate a generic JSON data. I am planning to return this two information. I'll just say overall status over here, and here I'll simply say, hey, it is in preparation. Okay, and here I'll say as this is in preparation, I'll just simply show it in the color of a gray. Okay, and ideally gray color has been shown in with a criticality called 0. Okay, if I have got any of this data, so I'll just go with else. Okay, and I'll say if my start date, end date, anything has changed, I can say to the extent that ideally let's just say my start date, end date are, let's just say, having some sort of a difference in data, then I have to generate the new status calculation by calculating the relevance of it. But as we can see, if I just scroll up a bit over here, are we having that particular old JSON somewhere placed? Okay, not really. Okay, let's just say I'll just comment this out for a while so that my execution does not fail over here. I'll just simply say, this one. Okay, and here we have got some information. There is a start date, end date, but as we can see, we have specified a date over here. That's the reason it is saying a date. Okay, but internally, when you look at ideally the metadata of it, okay, I'll just simply say go back, and here I'll just look at the metadata. Your start date, okay, not in the V4. Okay, maybe I guess it's only going to show it in the V4. Okay, then it's fine. So ideally, what we do is whenever we are calculating any date in the form of let's just say um, um, JSON, when you would like to get a current date. Okay, we ideally get the date using a terminology called date, because what I would like to calculate is whether my due date has already been lapsed. Okay, if I would like to compare it with anything, I would like to get my current date. In order for me to get the current date, the way I have is I can simply say, hey, LV today equal to maybe let's just say new, and I'll just simply say date. The moment you say date, it will give you the current date. But the idea is this particular date thing will ideally gives you the date along with the time and everything. Okay. So in order for us to just focus on the date, right, rather than focusing on, okay, hey, these let's just say uh, for example 23rd of December at 9:34, someone say, hey, mine is also 23rd of December but it's 10:30. So time might also interfere in the calculation. So ideally what you will do is whenever you're doing some sort of a date calculation in JavaScript, you will try to set other things to off. So I'll just simply say LV today, whatever day I have got, I'll just simply convert its hour, minute, second, everything to 0. So I'll just simply say hours of it, minutes of it, seconds of it, and milliseconds of it. I don't want to compare those. I just want to compare the dates of it. Okay, that's the reason. What you are saying is you will simply say that this particular date that you are getting, I'll call it as a date without any influence of a time. So I am just setting the influence of a time to 0. And I would like to compare it, for example, with due date. So I'll just simply say due date over here. And I'll simply say that due date, which I would like to calculate, I'll pass my due date that I am getting over here in the form of this one. So I'll just simply say this one. Okay. Now, here as well, we'll set the information other than the date to 0 because we don't want those things to influence. Okay. I'll just simply say 0. Because many a time what happens is you say today, if you're calculating the things on 9:36, it will just say, okay, till 9:36 was the date lapse. But ideally, a date is valid for 24 hours, right? So if that particular thing starts influencing, your calculation might be invalid. So I'll simply say that I would like to return something, but conditionally. I'll say if my due date over here has, let's just say, lapsed. So I'll just say if my due date was earlier to my today's date, it means the things has already been overdue. Right. So I'll just simply get the same JSON over here. I'll just copy this and I'll say, okay, in that case, it's overdue. In other case, I'll just simply say this one. So there is a kind of a ternary operator. Okay, it says a question mark saying this condition. If it is true, this is the code block that will get executed. If this is false, there is a code block that will get executed. So if my due date over here was earlier, I'll just simply say, let's just say it's overdue. And if it's overdue, I'll show it in the red. So I'll just simply say 1. But if I say my date over here was, let's just say, not overdue, but it's my date over here has not lapsed yet. So I'll just simply say on track. Okay. So in case of on track, we'll simply say, let's just say 3 because it's green in that case. And let's just try to uncomment this thing. Okay. So what we just got is that in this particular case, we would, okay, I'll just simply go back. We would get the right set of data by getting those calculation done out of this particular function. Okay, let's see how the things are going to get loaded. Okay, so here we see the status just got loaded. I'll just simply go over here and say on track. As you can see here also it's saying on track. But let's say if my due date would have been something which is less than let's just say today's date. So for example, I'm trying to write some old agenda over here. Okay, and I'm saying that my agenda was the plan was to start it from first and let's just say complete it on 12th. And maybe let's just say my due date over here was, let's just say sometime 14th. I'll just save this. As you can say, it's overdue because my due date over here was 14th and I'm still over here doing the activity on my agenda. Okay, so that's the reason it calculates overdue. Okay, so idea is that these are the thing. If the moment you go in edit, you will see that, okay, this information is not calculated because now you are manipulating the data. You are not sure what is the final set of data. Before that, your virtual field won't get calculated. But the moment you say your data is ready, based on that, your final data will be calculated over here. And this particular final set of data you can plug in using the SRV after. It's as good as your virtual element field that ideally you do have in your ABAP CDS views as well. That doesn't require a persistency, but that needs an extensive logic, and that's something you can plug and play. And those plugging of the logic you can write in SRV.after. What you can use for that is data if you would like to manipulate the data. But on top of it, if you are also trying to perform some sort of, let's just say, DB operations or something, you can simply go via the REQ as well. Request is ideally there to help you performing any operation. So for example, if you would like to add some errors, or let's just say if you would like to trigger some select queries as well, you can simply go by specifying, let's just say, where I can say is this REQ. So this REQ is nothing but your request parameter. Okay, let's just simply get an idea of it by saying that I am going over here test.http, and this let's just say output data over here is getting the data from this output data, which is nothing but a structure, which does not contain any data, right? So if it does not contain any data, then the simplest thing will be that maybe I can prepare this data so that my column 1, column 2, column 3 can contain something. So for example, I would like to add my ID over here. I'll keep column 1 as my, let's just say, agenda ID, keep my column 2 as an agenda, and I'll pass something dummy in my agenda column 3. It can be anything, right? Something that does not contain data persistency, I would like to return the data for that by writing some custom logic. So what I'll do is I'll simply go over here and I'll say what are the current implementation for this. So I'm getting that, okay, if my SIV.on output data is this is what was getting executed. Let me just simply say that it's not returning anything. I'll just simply comment these things out and I'll simply say I am going to write the things from the scratch. So it's now going to return the data which is empty, correct? So I'll just simply go over here and I'll simply say get this data. So it might return me some empty chunk over here. Okay. Rather than that, for example, if I say, hey, I would like to return some sort of a data, but the data over here will be nothing but some sort of a ID over here, which is nothing but, for example, let's just say generate some good. I'll copy this good and I'll just pass this over here. I'm just trying to prepare some dummy data for now. Okay. And I'll just simply say column 1. And here I am saying, okay, C1. And maybe I'll just simply say column 2. And I'll just simply say C2. And I am saying column 3, which is nothing but going to be C3. So I do have a structure which does not contain a data persistency, and I'm trying to retrigger a gate call on top of it. So the moment I do that, as you can see, my system is returning the information which I just wrote in that particular custom structure. or I can say custom handler, right? Now, what I would like to do is I would like to get the data from somewhere rather than me writing just set of a dummy data. Now, let's just define that somewhere. So it could be the case that this output data is something which I would like to get. The structure has been defined so that I can simply trigger a select query on this and I can get the data for that. I might need to map this information from ID to column 1, column 2, column 3, rather than passing it in the form of a agenda ID and agenda. Okay, so what I'll do in that particular case, I'll simply say that this particular um, assessments is something that I would like to trigger a select query on. Okay, so if I would like to trigger some select query on something, what I might do is I'll just simply go over here and I'll say I would like to trigger a select query. How can I do that? I can say trigger a select query on my, let's just say DB table via my controller. Okay, my DB table is nothing but the one which exists in my data model. Okay, so first thing is we should be understanding the steps that we might need. First thing is that we have to connect to the table, connect to the DB table. So ideally CAP is quite famous for optimizing the scope of your session. So like you have in ABAP where all the tables are visible, here that's not the case. Here you will ideally just keep the things to the minimum. So for example, here if I say my btp.c is the namespace which contain all the tables, I'll just simply say that I might connect to my entity. I'll just simply define a constant for my entity. You can go with variable, but as your table is not going to get changed during the execution cycle, you will define it as a constant. I'll just simply say cds.entities and you will say namespace. By doing this, you are trying to connect to your namespace. Now there can be 50 odd tables available, out of which you are saying I would like to just connect to this one. So you will simply say this one. What it would do is it will try to connect you to this table. Now you can perform any operation you would like to do over here. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just simply say that I would like to select the data. I would like to select the data from this. How can I do that? You will perform some select query. I'll just simply say const, for example, a assessment. Okay, and in this assessments, I'll simply say this particular thing that you just got over here, okay, is ideally a connection to DB. What are you trying to perform is a select query, which is a transaction on top of a DB. So you would need a initialization of the transaction. So step number 2 for you should be initialize the transaction. Okay, so you'll just simply say const tx equal to nothing but a CDS transaction, and you have to pass the request parameter. Now, these are most common thing. Whenever I am saying I have to perform anything that is going to touch my database from my Node.js controller, you have to initialize your transaction, which will need a parameter called REQ. This is something you will get in all the handlers. So for example, if you are in on, you will get it at the first place. If you are in the before, you will get also it in the first place. If you are in the after, the second parameter of yours is request. Okay. Any point in time you would like to perform any of the DB operation, if you are willing to initialize your transaction, you will write cds.transaction REQ, and REQ is nothing but your request parameter, and this request parameter over here, you will simply get over here by this. Okay. Now, after doing this, what you will do is you will perform some sort of select operation. So I'll just simply say tx.run. So this run method is nothing but your like JDBC run command. Okay, in your in your any sort of a database intensive operation, you ideally write a run command within which you write an open SQL. Okay, here the things are more safe because you have been not asked to pass any things in the form of a string. Rather than that, there are certain keywords. So I'll just simply say, as you can see, the moment I start typing, I just got select. Then we use a dot operator. I'll just simply say dot from, and here you can pass the database table. Okay, as you can see, template string query. I'll just simply say these are database template. If you would like to get something specific, you can also say dot where. Okay, anything that you would like to perform group by anything, you can simply go by dot operator. Just write a dot and you will see all the things which are possible. If you are also willing to select only specific columns, right? So you can just simply say columns and you can specify a list of columns over here, saying, for example, I would like to have ID and maybe agenda ID and whatnot. Okay. But we would go with all the data, but just for you to know, there is a transaction that's going to get executed by performing a select operation, and this operation can be anything. It can be select, update, delete, anything. What you will do is you will always initialize a transaction. Within this, you will write which operation you are willing to perform on which data base table, and you will select, you will write the required dot operators. Okay, I'll just say select dot from, I'll just get the data from assessment. It will give me the data in my A assessments. Okay, over here. After doing that, what I might do is I might try to perform, I can say return some sort of a data in my output. So in order for me to do that, I have to prepare some sort of a response data. Okay, I have to perform some sort of a. Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay, so this. Okay, now in order for us to convert this particular A assessments from here to let's just say a JSON output, right? In this case, the JSON output might contain 3 columns. So I'll just simply say I would like to define a variable, for example, a JSON output. You can name it as anything. Okay. And in this case, what you will do is you will say that this JSON output is currently, for example, empty, but I might plan pushing something going forward. So what you will do, you will simply say that this assessment that you got over here, okay, you will write for each statement on this. So there is an array. I'll remove this and I'll just say for each of the data over here, let me just call it as an item. You would like to push something, right? So I'll just simply say that in this a JSON over here, okay, sorry, a JSON output over here, let's just try to push some sort of a data. And here what I'll push the data which I need. Okay, so JSON output over here is going to get returned from here, correct? Okay, what does it mean? It means that it needs this column of which are there as a part of its structure, ID, column 1, column 2, everything. So I'll just simply say this ID. And where can I get that ID from? I'll just simply get it from let's just say item.id, because this item over here is also having a CUID, which is a string 36. I can map simply the same thing to here as well. Okay. Other than that, for example, I would like to pass my agenda ID to column 1. So I'll just simply say column 1 and I'll pass my agenda ID over here. So I'll just simply say item.agenda ID. Another thing, maybe I'll just simply say my column 2 over here. I would like to map my, for example, agenda over here. Item.agenda. And maybe let's just say for column 3, if you would like, you can pass something from the DB, or maybe if I say I can pass something dummy data possible. Okay. So what it will do is it will try to connect to this DB table. It will initialize the transaction buffer. It will simply try to trigger a select query, and whatever data that you will get, it will simply, let's just say, I can say map those particular data in the form of a JSON output, and it will pass it. Okay. Now, let's just remember one more thing. As I mentioned, Node.js is an asynchronous language. Okay. Now, in this function, as you can see, it's going to execute this step by step, isn't it? It will execute this first, execute this second, execute this third. There is a single connection. It will get executed over here without any sort of an issue. Okay. What does it say? That there is an entity over here which returns you the definition. Okay. I'll just go over here. It says there is a cds.transaction and it will return you the transaction. Let's just say tx.run. Okay, there is my tx.run over here, which ideally, as you can see, returns you what? It returns you the promise. Now in Node.js, promise is a keyword. What does it say? It's like, hey, I have a, let's just say, uh, uh, for example, if I say in my bank account currently there are 1,000 rupees, but I am saying someone that I have 10,000, I have got 10,000 rupees. Okay, Now, why I am saying that? Because someone else has promised me that someday I'll give you 9,000 rupees that you have borrowed me, that I have borrowed from you. Okay, but that's a promise, right? Till the time that person does not give me that particular 9,000 rupees, they are of no worth for me. I cannot use it at the point in time where I need, right? So that's the same terminology on which this promise works. Promise is what? It says that as there is a database operation, it might take some time in order for it to get executed. But I don't want your execution to stop over here. Rather, you can just continue. I'll let you know wherever I have got this particular data. But question is, can I proceed with this operation over here till the time I have not got this particular A assessment's value? Not
Mm.
possible, right? So in that particular case, what I'll do is I'll simply say that I would like to resolve this promise and I would like to wait till the time this person does not give me the information I need. Okay, and for that, what you will say? You will say I will wait over here. For that, there is a keyword called await. In Node.js, in asynchronous terminology, in order for you to resolve the promise at the point in time, because that's needed for you to execute the statement that follows, you will write a keyword called await. In the certain places, you will also see some people writing assessment dot then. Then is also one way of resolving the promise. But these days, everyone just started following, and I can say, as per the recent guideline, await is the keyword that you should use. That's more readable. Okay. So I'll say await, but as you can see, await can only be written if your function has been defined as a asynchronous. By nature, if you do not specify it synchronous, so I'll just simply say async over here. So now my this function can behave asynchronously. It will go over here. It will let's just say execute this. By the time this is getting executed, it will execute this as well. But the moment it reaches over here, it will wait for this statement to get executed. Or I can say anything before that to get executed, even before shifting over here, shifting to the next statement. Okay, that's the main idea. So what we did is we just say await. So now this tx.run, which was returning me the promise, now it will return me a actual set of data, and that set of data I'll map over here. So now if I just go over here, I'll just simply say I would like to get some data. As you can see, it just got me the ID that was there in my assessment that I created, agenda 01, AG01, the one which we added onto the that agenda ID table, and I had the dummy data as well. So there's the thing. Whenever you are willing to perform any operation on any of the DB table, because it looks simple, right? I can simply expose this, my CDS thing will expose it as a service, my UI will query and I'll respond it. But life is not always that simple, right? We might end up writing some logic internally on the controller layer. So how we can connect to this data? So this is how you can do it. Okay. Anyone having any doubt on anything so far? So we use on handler for, let's just say, overriding the standard operations, returning data for a JSON structure, or I can say a structure itself. We wrote some validation, we map it to the field, we manipulated the data after it has been decided, we calculated some status as well. Anyone having any doubts till now? Okay, seems we are good. Okay, now let's say maybe we'll try to we'll try to perform few more operations. We'll try to get some more thing onto the controller. Now, why we are focusing suddenly onto the controller is that CAP has got two aspects. Okay, one CDS part of it, one Node.js. We know CDS, we know, let's just say we understood it a bit. We just started with the controller. After doing this, we might also try to connect to something which is not part of the, let's just say, native CAP. So for example, some sort of a third party API if you are willing to consume. We might end up writing a plenty of Node.js code. For that, we should be comfortable with using a Node.js. That's the reason we are doing that. Okay. Now, let's just say one more thing. For example, I'll simply say that I have this particular set of a data. I'll just go back over here. I'll refresh this. So we got this data. It says overdue and all. here we have got one more column, right? Obsolete. So for example, as I mentioned, it could be possible that on top of this create and delete, you might also need some action saying, hey, this assessment which I was doing, I don't need it. That's something which is obsolete. I was doing it, but now I don't need it, right? So I might also need some sort of action. I can click on this and I can say, hey, I would need some action. I will perform this on this. And I might also ask my user to add a comment saying I don't need it or XYZ, whatever things they might would like to pass in the input. I can allow them, but I would like to perform something on this. So what I can say is I can simply say this reason comment over here. I'll just simply update this over here as well. I would like to perform such an operation. How can I do that? In order for me to achieve that, we would understand one more terminology in CAP called actions. Here we created an entity. Now, on top of an entity, if I would like to perform some thing, some sort of a operation, I'll call it as an action. You have got one more block over here called actions. Okay. In the actions block over here, you can write n number of actions which are associated with that particular entity. I'll simply say in this assessment, you are going to perform some actions. What kind of action I'll call? So you can mark, you can say, you can create n number of action, whatever are, let's just say, relevant to your use case. I'll simply say I would like to create an action. For example, mark my, let's just say this assessment as obsolete. As I'm in the context of assessment, I'm not saying assessment. Instead, I'm saying mark as obsolete. Okay, it can be anything. And here I'll simply say that assessment over here should contain n number of parameters. By default, as you are on top of your assessment, your primary key is when you are going to follow that you are going to perform the operation on the ID of this assessment. But there is something called reason comment as well, right? So if you would also like to pass this reason comment, you can simply say reason comment over here. The name can also differ. It does not need for it to match with any of the property of your entity. What you are saying is that, hey, I would need an assessment over here, and this assessment should have an action, and this action over here, which I'm calling it as a mark as obsolete. The moment this action is performed, this particular let's just say action will require one parameter called reason. You have to pass it in the input. The moment you pass it, this particular thing should be implemented, because this is just a skeleton, isn't it? If I just say, I'll just go over here and I'll show you the metadata, and I'll search with this action that I just created, you will see that mark as obsolete is bound. Is bound, it means it's bound to an entity. As an input, or I can say the entity on which it will be performed is nothing but an assessment entity. On top of it, it will need a parameter called reason. So there is a parameter that it will need, which is of 50 characters. So you have to pass all these things in order for that, in order for that particular action to be performed. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just simply say that this mark is obsolete over here. I need to expose that. How can I expose it? What you would like it to be visible as? So for example, I would like it to be visible as, let's just say, action on my table. Okay. So in terms of a CDS annotation, we know UI line item. We learned that UI has an annotation called line item over here, has got a data field which says that using this you can show the data. On top of it, you can also plan showing something else. Okay, so for example, it's not just uh, data which I'm planning to show. On top of it, I'm also planning to show so-called data field for action. I would like to show some sort of action over here. What all action I can show? So as you can see, it says mark as obsolete. The moment I selected, it just specified the fully qualified name of it. It says my controller service mark as obsolete. This is the one, and I can also give it some label. So I'll just simply say mark as obsolete. Okay. I'll just go over here and I'll refresh this. As you can see, now I got the action as it's defined on entity. The moment I select any of them, I can see that particular action getting enabled. Now, I would like to perform something. as I shown you already, it has got one parameter called reason. So if I click anything on this is only going to give it the context of the record on which I'm going to perform it. But other than that, this parameter input, how anyone can pass it over here. I'll just click on this, and as you can see, it just come up with something called reason. Okay, so here you have to pass something. The moment you do that, your operation will be performed. Okay, now have we implemented anything for this mark as obsolete? No, right? It's just a skeleton. Now within mark as obsolete, I can do n number of things. So who is responsible for implementing this action? That's us, right? We should be doing something so that this mark as obsolete can mark an assessment as obsolete for sure. Correct. So what I'll do is I'll simply go over here and I'll click on this and I'll just say, hey, I would like to mark this as obsolete, and I'll just give a comment called XYZ. Let's see what are the things that's going to get performed. I'll just click on a network tab over here. And here I'll just simply say mark as obsolete. As you can see, it says this has no handler for mark as obsolete for this particular entity. It's just let's just say it as say it to us in the simple layman term that this particular service should have some implementation, but there are no handler defined for this one. Can you do that? Right. And from the skeleton as well, I'll just simply show you for your knowledge that the moment you click on this, you will see that it triggered a post call. It triggered a post call on an assessments ID, and it just triggered this action like this, and it just passed a JSON for the parameters. This is how any of your action will be performed if it contains a parameter. Okay, I'll just close this, but we have to implement this action. Okay, as good as that. I'll just copy this, and here we should be implementing this action now. How we can do that? Okay, let's just try to do it in a bit different way. Okay, a simple way, but maybe something that can also give you one more idea how implementation can be done rather than let's just say overloading your simple file or single file with all the set of implementation. How the things can be modularized. Okay, so I would like to implement let's just say the action handler for me. Okay, so I'll just simply say SRV on. Here in this operation, you can perform different operation, but if you do have an action, you can simply pass the name of it. For that, you are not supposed to write read, update, and all. You'll just simply say SRV.on. It will just have an on implementation for that, and you will do that. I could have done REQ and this one saying, okay, I'll perform all this operation over here, but it might also become much non-maintainable, right? Because the code line over here is increasing, right? So let me just say this XYZ over here. I would like to create one more handler over here. For example, let's just call it as an action handler. I'll just say action handler.js. Okay, and here I might implement some sort of method which will do this particular, let's just say logic writing. I'll just simply say module dot exports, and maybe I'll just simply say let's just name it as a mark as obsolete. So there is one more way of making something public. How we did over here, we did define a function and we said module dot export equal to this, that become public. If I have more than one thing which I would like to define as a public, I'll simply say module dot export. I'll give the name on the left hand side, and I'll just simply say, hey, I would like to define it as a function which can accept one parameter, and I'll just call it like this. Okay, what it will do is it will define a function. The name of it will be this, and the parameter that it can accept is this, and this will become public. Okay, now as this is public, I would like to use this one for my logic rather than me writing everything within this. Okay, first thing I should be doing is I should be calling this function, correct? But in order for me to do that, I have to connect this particular file action handler from this one. So I'll just simply say const lo action handler over here, and I'll just simply say require like we have for package. I'll just simply say dot in the current folder what all things I have. So it just proposed me two things because dot is nothing but a current folder. So in the current folder I have got this. I just wrote this, and this action handler over here is now connected. So I'll just remove all this thing. Rather, I'll just simply specify a quite simple thing, which will say that, hey, I would like to define allow action handler dot. As you can see, it just suggested mark as obsolete. That's all. You see, you are not also passing the function parameter. Rather, the default parameter that this can accept the same has been directly passed upon to this one. Okay. Now, as you have written over here, mark as obsolete, the parameter REQ that it was supposed to receive, this particular action handler will directly receive it in this particular form. Okay. So we will use this particular placeholder for us to perform that operation that we want. Okay. Now, what we might do in this particular case, saying I would like to perform some operation. Okay. As simple as that, if I just go over here and I now try doing this XYZ, it might not complain saying you don't have a handler, because I do have a handler. I have a handler, but I'm not doing anything within that. That's a separate story. Okay. But I can simply perform my operation, whatever I want from here. Okay. Now, what do I want to perform? Okay. So simple thing is, I would like to get which particular agenda they are talking about, which particular assessment they are talking about. The moment I get that, like we perform, let's just say select operation on top of it. We might also plan to perform some, let's just say update operation, saying update assessment, and I'll simply say set two more thing, and I'll just simply say set is obsolete equal to true, and maybe reason equal to whatever I'm receiving from the input. As simple as that. But that's one of the approach using which we can do that. I can say option one is, okay, I can say not option one. The steps that we are anyway going to perform over here is this one. We'll first get the input data. Okay, we'll get the input data for, let's just say, assessment key, and maybe the input reason comment. We have to figure that out, right? What are the things which are being passed? Once we have that, now our purpose is to update the DB. Update the DB. For that, we have got two options. How we can do that? Either we can simply go with a update SQL within tx.run. This is something we can do, but we won't do, because we have got some more example into which we are anyway going to learn it. Other thing, the complex, or I guess say many a time you might need it, but you might not find much blogs about it. I can say option two, which we might also do is, we'll create a database procedure, okay, and call DB procedure with the data to perform this operation. What is a DB procedure ideally? You would have worked on some sort of a AMDP someday, right? AMDP, ABAP managed database procedure. Same way, these are normal stored procedures. They are also called database procedures. What you will do is, you will create a database procedure that accept two input parameter. For example, your assessment ID and the comment. The moment you pass those two things, system will try performing, or I can say system will perform any of the SQL thing you would like to do. And there within that will perform this update operation. Okay, so we are also sure that, okay, it's not only table which I would like to call, but for example, if I would like to create a procedure within my CAP project, how can I create that? If I am supposed to call that particular procedure within my CAP project, how can I do that as well? Okay, these are the things we are going to learn right now. Okay, now first thing first, let's just go step by step. I'll say get the input data. How can I get this input data? Okay, to make the life easier, let me just uh, stop this execution and rather run this thing into a debugger mode. I'll just simply say controller over here, and I'll just simply execute it from here. Okay, now here we see that I have got a set of data. The moment I click on go, I am getting this all set of data. I'll put a breakpoint somewhere over here because that's a place where we can put, because I don't have any other code lines available. I'll just simple click on mark as obsolete. It did not trigger anything. I'll just simply say XYZ. I'll click on this. As you can see, it's just waiting and I got a debugger. Now we should be figuring out the places from where we can get the data. We are getting REQ in the input. Expand that. We are getting input parameters. Each time the key parameter of a bound action you will always get in the request.params. First thing is I would like to get this ID, right? So I'll just copy it as an expression. So what it gives me is that request.params over here underscore ID gives you the data. But it's still a bit weird, right? Because what we are doing is we are trying to get the things from an underscore thing, which is a private. So let's see if we can get some public thing. So here you see there is something called params. I'll click on this and it gives me a 0. And now there is a public thing. I'll just copy this as an expression and this gives me the information. Look, in CAP or in any of the many a time you would also see the things in Java's your UI5 as well, that you might have multiple operations, multiple methods, multiple variables whose conventions start with @ wherever possible, avoid using them because they are private, right? Now, what is the limitation, or I can say, what are the drawback of using the things which are private? Private variables are defined assuming that I'm only going to use this within my scope, right? But let's just say someone started using it in their own custom implementation. But as, for example, I am the developer, would introduce that private variable, I can change it anytime, right? Because I know the things which are not private, which are not public, are private. They are only designed to be used in my scope, so I can change it anytime I want. But then your application will stop working. Okay, so I could have got my parameter ID in two of the ways, but I'll always go by this one, which is public, because this implementation is never going to get changed. Okay, the signature of it is not going to get changed any point in time. Okay, so I got this parameter ID. Another thing I might get is this data. So as you can see, I just get this data over here, and I think is a reason. I'll copy this as an expression. I'll paste it over here. So these are the two things which I got. So I got these two things. Let me just write, for example, where as reason comment. Okay, and I'll just say there is a reason comment. And for example, other thing which I got, it is a uh, assessment ID, and I'll just call it as this one. Okay, so I just defined two things. Sorry, copy this. Okay, so I just got these two things. I got these two variables. Now my point is, we can go with this, but we won't use it. Instead, we'll call the procedure. Okay, so how we can call the procedure? Question comes, how we can define the procedure at the first point in time. Okay, so that's something we are going to do right now. So we got this information, whatever we are looking for. I'll just format the document. I'm not sure whether it will format it in the right shape. Yeah, it did a bit. Okay, indentation got changed, but that's fine. Okay, I got this information. I have to call a procedure. Let's just see how a procedure ideally looks alike, isn't it? I'll simply say, I would like to create a procedure over here. Okay, now one thing. I have a whole CAP project, right? Where should I define my procedure? So anytime you are saying you are going to define something which is around the database, you will define it in DB. Something which is around service, you'll define it in service. Procedure is nothing but a database procedure. Any sort of database artifact, or let me also tell you in a different term. So for example, if I open my HANA container over here, okay, let's just say HANA Explorer. Okay, so I'll just simply say close all, and maybe what are we looking at? We are looking at anything. For example, let's just look at this one. I have got views, cubes, function, and whatnot, and procedures and tables. Anything which is within this particular list, you should always perform those operations within your DB folder because it's in the scope of your DB. So if you are going to define a procedure at once you deploy, this is the place where it's going to start appearing. Okay, so what you'll do is you'll define a procedure over here itself. Okay, so let me just do that. I'll say I'll define a procedure over here. I'll just simply go in SRC. Within the DB SRC, you will define all those things. I'll just call up, create a folder called procedures. So you remember when we define a synonym, we also define it within the SRC folder. Same way, your procedure should also be over here. Okay, and I'll just simply create a procedure. I'll just, for example, as it's a stored procedure, I'll just simply say st underscore, maybe let's just say mark as obsolete. And the extension of it will be HDB procedure. PROCEDURE. Okay. Okay, let's just say control space. It has got many things. I'll just simply say procedure. Okay, and I'll give the name. So for example, I'll just say st mark as obsolete. Okay, and I'll just simply add a round bracket. The purpose of this round bracket is to give the, let's just say parameters. Okay, I'll just simply go over here and maybe I'll pass the parameter. So for example, okay, other than parameter, you are also supposed to define the skeleton of it. So I'll simply define the skeleton, which will say the language of it. Language of it, it's going to be what? You remember AMDP? Many of you would have worked on AMDP. So I'll just simply say SQL script. So this is the language that we are going to use for procedure. And in case of any data security, your database security should be applied. So I'll just simply say SQL security invoker. Okay, and then I'll define my signature as, and you will define your okay, sorry, procedure. So this is going to be the skeleton. This is empty skeleton of any of your procedures that you build in your lifetime. These all it should contain. Okay, so it contains a begin and end. It contains a round bracket within which your any of the parameters can be defined. And this too, maybe you can just let's just say leave any of the worry that you do have around this. These are just the language. Okay. Now, what I would like to do, I would like to perform some operation, but before that, I would like to pass certain thing in the input, isn't it? I would like to pass this reason, comment, and assessment ID. So for example, let's just say input parameter are given with the form of a in. So I'll just say in assessment ID. And for example, what was the length of an assessment ID? I'll just say 36 character. So I'll just simply say n varchar 36. At the same point in time, I'll just simply say reason comment you are getting. I'll just say reason comment over here and varchar, and maybe I'll just get the data of 50 characters. Okay. So it just define parameters for that. Afterwards, what I am supposed to do is I am supposed to update certain thing. Now this is a SQL script. How I can give an inline comment in SQL script? You those who would have worked on AMDP would know. Those who would have worked on during your college days into any sort of a PL/SQL statement will also know that any sort of inline comment are given using double dash. All we are doing is we are doing giving a comment saying we are going to update the assessment table over here. Okay, with some sort of obsolete flag and the comment. Okay, as simple as that. Now I would like to set something. So whenever I am saying mark as obsolete, definitely I am marking something as a true. I'll just simply say I would like to update something. Here you can write a plain SQL statements. Okay, I'll just simply say I would like to update something. What is that? Something that you are willing to update. So I'll just go over here in the gen src gen, and you can get the name of the table from here. I'll just say this one. This is the name of your table, BTP C assessment. Okay, I'll just say BTP C assessment over here, and I'll set what you are going to set your thing, which are nothing but is obsolete over here. You are saying is obsolete over here is something I'm trying to mark as a true. And maybe other than that, what are the things? Reason comment. So you are willing to mark your reason comment. Where I can get that from the input. So I'll just copy this and I'll pass it as a variable. variable are ideally given with a colon in before. Okay, colon before it. So I'll just simply say colon over here. Which record I would like to update? I'll just simply say where my ID of this particular table, because that's the primary key, right? ID of this particular table, it's going to be what? It's going to be my, let's just say the ID that I'm getting over here. As simple as that. So whenever someone calls this procedure, system is going to ultimately perform this operation, and system is going to get this parameter and perform this update operation over here. Okay. Now, let's just say whether this procedure is actually in a right syntax or not. Okay. In order for us to do that, what you can simply do is you can simply consider that this is a part of a DB folder, right? It's part of your DB component. If you would like to make the things uh, deployed on the running DB container that we are using right now, you can simply execute the same command, cds deploy to HANA. Let's see, it will do the syntax check. If you would have, let's just make some mistake, it will tell us. It just executed everything, and maybe it should have also detected the procedure. Did it? Yeah, it says st mark as obsolete. This is also something that has been processed, and that's now been, let's just say, made available in the procedure section over here. So this procedure also got generated and shifted in the generated component. So this can also work in a normal way. Okay. Now, what you can do is, or I can say what you have to do is, you have to call this procedure. The operation is quite simple. Any operation you are willing to perform in your CAP controller, okay, you have to always follow the same step. You have to always initialize the transaction. Initialize the transaction. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just simply say const tx equal to cds dot transaction. You remember we did that earlier over here. I'll just simply say const tx equal to cds transaction. Okay, and maybe then we'll call the procedure. Okay, so maybe I guess before that, maybe there is one question from Ashok. Yeah, Ashok.
Uh,
I see you raise your
yes,
hand. Yeah.
yes. Actually, this validation should be done from the UFI side, right? Not from the, as you said, it is the just like a OData. So this
Hmm.
validation we don't do in the OData, right? It should done in the UFI, right?
No. So idea is, look, as per the recent guideline, okay, all
Mm-hmm.
the validation earlier, it used to be the case that you were doing all the validation on UI, but now the idea is to make the things which are on client side very lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so UI should not most probably perform any validation until and unless it's a data type specific. So for example, something that you can make out from your data metadata saying this only can accept integer, you can do those validation. But if I say what
Okay.
should be mandatory, what should be optional, those all the things service should tell. Why
Mm,
that's the case? Because if I say I would need a start date over here in order for my data's accuracy, UI cannot commit on that, right? Because my backend knows in order for this particular data record to be accurate, I need a start date. Other than that, for example, if there are certain custom validations. So for example, if I say I have something called company code, for example, over here, in order for UI to validate whether that particular company code data is valid or not, you might again need to scan through the company code data. For that, you will need an additional get call to get the company code's possible value, and then you will validate it through. That's the reason all those things should be validated onto the backend, be it CAP, which you are doing over here, even in the RAP model, right? The RESTful ABAP programming model that has been introduced recently, you will see it has got the validation nodes.
mhm.
Anything that you from a data perspective which you are supposed to validate, anything that you are supposed to define whether this should be mandatory, whether this field should be editable or backend should automatically determine it, all those controls should be done via backend only. That's the new guideline. Maybe you can go through the best practices but the idea is any of the validation and everything that you perform over here should be backend driven, And that's the reason backend has got that capability, isn't it? We never did
Okay.
any sort of a UI controller change, but still we are able to see those things validated. We are able to see those things getting bound on an individual field because backend has been enriched to support those capabilities and best practices. But yeah, it has not been stopped on UI. So if you would like, you can do it on UI, but the guideline or the best practice says that it should be done on the backend side.
Okay.
Okay.
And one more question. Yeah, as you said, it is just like a OData. Okay. In which URL we have to give for UFA people if they ask this one URL? SRV URL we have
URL
to
of what?
give.
URL of what? You mean the
Yeah,
endpoint
suppose,
service?
yeah, for CAPM project, whatever we define. So, suppose if front-end people want to consume, which URL we have to provide for them?
For them, you have to provide this one. I'll show you. Maybe I guess it would be down because we never deployed the, or I can say started the service right now, but I'll tell you. And I guess that's
Mhm.
something we are anyway going to create a UI project. Maybe I guess in a week follows. Okay, that's where we are going to consume and create a UI project. But just to answer your question, here in the, if you go in overview over here, you will see the SRV over here, right? In this
Yeah,
SRV,
yeah.
you will see the URL.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the URL that will become your endpoint because out of this, the moment it started, you will see the same dollar metadata kind of a thing. So you will get your service metadata and all the operation can be routed via that. So these are the
Okay.
URLs that you will pass. So there are this service URL plus there is going to be one more concept of application router. So if there is any
Okay.
application router that's going to take the precedence. So in case of application router, you will always pass the path or I can say endpoint of application router. If that's not there, you will pass that of the service. But we'll
Oh,
learn that maybe the moment we start consuming this into a Fiori application, we'll do that as well. So that end to
okay.
end is anyway planned. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have created this procedure. In order for us to call any of this DB thing table we already queried, now I would like to call a procedure. I initialize a transaction. I would like to call the procedure. For that, I'll need a signature. Okay, so I'll just define a query to call the procedure. So what I'll do is I'll just simply say as query. And in order for you to call the procedure, you always write a call and you will specify the name of your procedure. So I'll just specify it like this. Plus the parameters that it does have, you will specify those parameter over here. I'll just simply say this one. And you will simply say question mark because you are going to pass the value of it, right? So I'll just simply say question mark. So you can pass it in the subsequent call. So this is how you define the query. And in order for you to execute the procedure, what you will do is you will simply say, I would like to call the procedure. I'll just simply say procedure call. Okay. And you will simply say, hey, I would like to execute this. For that, I might write tx.run and I might pass my sQuery over here. And how many question mark it has got? Two. So within your second parameter, you ideally pass this in within the square bracket parameters in the right sequence. So first parameter over here, it is expecting is assessment ID. So I'll just copy this and pass it over here. Second, it is expecting is a reason comment. So you will pass the second reason comment over here. Okay. And as there is a TX run, which is going to return you the promise, we have to write an await for that. And as we are writing an await, we'll convert this function into a asynchronous one. Okay, I'll just save this. And now we have got this particular things executed. Okay, now let's see how the things are going to work. I'll just simply clear this out and I'll just simply say CDS watch profile hybrid. It is connected to my DB. I'll just go back over here. I'll just close this and I'll refresh my page. Okay, so we have got this thing. I'll just simply click on this and I'll say I would like to mark this as obsolete. I'll just simply say XYZ for now. And I'll just simply mark this as obsolete. Okay, maybe I guess because of some issue, it just never refreshed itself. But yeah, we can simply say that the moment we do that, your record got refreshed, right? Now, this thing you can do simply if you would like to by specifying certain thing. For example, you can also simply return the instance of your own so that your data can also be refreshed. Okay, so we see that the moment we did that, your yes also was set over here, your reason comment was set over here. At the same point in time, if you would like to give some sort of a return parameter, you can do that as well. Plus, as the data was updated from the Fury side, you can also give some sort of a side effect. That's also one of the possible option that you can choose for. So the idea over here is that other than the standard actions, if you are also willing to create some custom actions and you are willing to execute it on the set of a data, that's quite possible. CAP is capable of handling not only the normal JavaScript, but certain SQL intensive operation as well, which can be around your table or the database artifact, be it let's just say defined in the form of a procedures, functions, or the synonyms. Anything can also work over here. Plus, you should ideally modularize your code in the form of a separate file depending on its use case. So for example, I have defined it as an action handler. Tomorrow, I might also plan to modularize it even more. Okay, so your code can become more manageable. I hope this is clear to everyone. Anyone having any doubt, any questions so far? Okay, so seems we are good. Now we what we are going to understand is this is a kind of a DB flavor we understood. We also understood some sort of a controller flavor. We also understood that when I have certain UI like this, we can also perform some operation without writing much line of logic, but rather the things will start working by its own. If you would like to write some custom logic, we can also go via some virtual fields as well. This is all around your data. I can say a plain record data. How about the media entities? Okay, so what happens is, so for example, I am saying my assessment is there and someone says, hey, I would like to upload some test result for my assessment, right? I would like to upload a PDF result, which I just created, which contains all the readings and all the parameters. Where can I upload that? Does your cap gives me that capability using which I can perform some media operation, or I can say media upload? Is that possible? So the question, sorry, the answer to this is yeah, that's definitely quite possible. Okay, in order for us to understand that maybe in a better way, let's just say we would like to perform some, I can say create some media entity. Before that, let's just try to at least have these things uh, available on my live environment. So going forward, we can use that whenever we need. I'll just simply go over here and maybe we'll simply say I would like to let's just say deploy these things and I'll be using this. I'll just simply go in package.json. And maybe I guess over here you would have seen that maybe when we were oh, BTP EMP, yeah. Here you would have seen that when we were using this, we created some basic authentication. So yeah, next time when we go with Access UA, we'll use that. Till the time, let's just also add a basic authentication to this one as well. I'll just go in package.json for this one, and I'll just add a basic authentication to this one as well. So it has got some basic authentication, required packages, and all the things that we need are kind of ready. Let's just deploy this. The endpoint will be up and running. Then we'll proceed towards the media thing. Okay, I'll just close all and let's just try to build this. Do we have we got everything in the empty YML? We have got the service, DB, and this one as well. Okay, so now let's just try to build this particular project. It's generating the make file. It should now deploy it. Oh, sorry, build it. And now we have got this. Okay, now I have to deploy this, but as we know, we are having some issue while deploying via the interface. So let's just go with a command line. I'll just say cf deploy empty archive. Okay, and here we'll say this one. Okay, it's trying to deploy it. It will create the DB and the service part of it. Okay, it's performing those operations. By the time, let's just understand this. Anyway, this is something which is anyway going to build and deploy. Let's just understand the thing that we are talking about, media. Okay, as we are talking about a media thing, let's just think of the scenario that you have worked so far. So for example, if I say you would have worked on a media entity for different purposes till now, for example, you would have worked on a media entity if you would like to upload some sort of attachment. You would have worked on it if you would like to have some sort of a operation of upload and download, right? And someone would have worked in the form of a gateway as well. In old days, some sort of a gateway entities you would have created, and you would have done certain operations, right? What all things you used to do when it comes to marking an entity as a media and let's just say performing all those operations. What you used to do is you used to flag that this particular entity, um, you used to flag that this particular entity was a media entity as media entity, right? On top of it, what you used to do is you used to define, okay, some sort of a media type, right? Saying which particular property is going to consume, or I can say which property is going to contain the type of the media, whether it's going to be Excel or a zip, or let's just say any other PDF file or anything, right? These all the things were possible. And these all the things, after doing all this thing, you used to implement certain method, maybe some sort of a create stream and update, let's just say get stream and create stream, right? Create stream was for ideally upload of the entity, and your get stream was for the download. These are the things that you used to do, correct? On top of it, there used to be also certain advantage, or I can say capability, was that if I say I'm having some create stream within this, if I do not want to push something directly to the database, I used to go by some Gauss base attachment or some sort of a data DMS store. Okay, using which I can upload my attachment onto a layer which is not a database, right? Because those are alternatives where your media files can be stored in a cheaper alternative way, right? Why we are saying it as a cheaper alternative way? Let's just consider this. So for example, I'm creating an entity, right? So for example, I plan to create an entity over here, call for example a media. I would like to upload some media file over here, and I would like to give it some random ID. I'll just call it as a GUID. Okay. After adding a GUID, I would say that, hey, I would like to, let's just say upload something. So I would need a bare minimum thing which are required for my media thing to be contained. For example, I'll put some column called content, which will contain the content of it, as in the binary content. If my PDF is worth 2 MB, it will contain a content which is of size 2 MB. So that particular database entry itself will take a size of a 2 MB, right? So it's called ideally a large binary. On top of it, let's just say you used to specify some sort of a media type in your, let's just say ABAP as well, right? In your ABAP, this large binary was called so-called a row string. You would have heard that anyway. You used to call it as a row string. And that row string is internally nothing but a binary. Your media type can be anything which says whether this is an Excel, zip, PDF, or what kind of data it is going to contain. We ideally call it as a string. Okay. Um, Other than that, there can be some file name as well, right? Which you used to contain. So I'll just call it as a string again. So these are the things that it used to contain. Okay. Now, as it used to contain all this set of information, we used to create the same sort of entity in gateway. It's the same process for us to do those things into CAP as well. Okay. Now, if I say I would like to mark certain thing as a media, okay, what we used to specify is that whether my entity is a media entity or not. That's what we used to specify on a gateway level. Here, there are ways to specify that. Plus we used to specify media type as well. So these are the operations that we used to perform in gateway. Same way here we have to perform the same thing with the help of some annotation. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll just simply say that, hey, this content over here is a media, but the type of this media is going to come via what? So I'll just simply say core dot media type. And here you are going to specify that this is going to be your media type. So here you will specify the property out of the one which you have specified, which is going to say that these are PDF, Excel, zip, what kind of file it is. Other than that, this particular media type over here, you will say that, okay, yeah, this is the media type. So you'll just simply say is media type and you will simply say true. So it says that, yeah, this particular property is going to contain the media type. Okay. Third one, and the one which you ideally use to use your in your create stream and get stream. So you remember when I say I would like to, let's just say, download, right? I would like to download something. You used to specify two kind of data on your response. You used to specify some sort of a header data and body data. In your body, you ideally specify, or I can say use to return the row string, or I can say some sort of a value content. On your header, what you used to specify is the file name. Now this file name you used to specify in the form of a so-called content disposition. Okay, what is the purpose of it? It says that how my content should be disposed. Whenever I am downloading it, what is the name of it? How my content should be disposed on my client side. That's what you ideally call it as. Okay. Same way here you will simply specify that your core dot content disposition over here will have a file name, and this particular file name is going to be stored in this particular file name property. This is what you ideally specify. Okay, so that's what we ideally call it as a media entity. These are the bare minimum thing which ideally any media entity should have. Okay, it will have a, let's just say, large binary type. It will have some sort of a media type. Plus it will say that the moment you specify that your media type over here, or I can say your file name, then you should also specify it in the form of a content disposition. It simply specify how your content is going to get disposed. Okay, now once we do that, let's just check for the advantage. After doing this, I can simply go ahead and expose this entity. Okay, I can expose this entity as a service endpoint, and the moment I do that, it will start behaving as an endpoint. And I can simply, like, I used to do it for normal entity, right? Assessment entity. I'll simply go over here. For example, I'll just go over here and I'll simply say, hey, I would like to create an entity over here whose name is media file, and I am selecting the data from this one. As simple as that. Now, what it will do is it will enable the create, update, delete. Just by doing this, your media operation will start working. You can upload an attachment, download an attachment, everything will start working just by this line of code. I'll just specify an entity, just expose it as an entity, that's all. I'm not supposed to implement any create stream, get stream, anything. Okay, but uh, the downside of this is that when you do this, system knows that this is going to contain your media. This is going to contain your actual database components, which is actually the file size of it. Now let's just think from a HANA perspective, right? Your HANA over here is so famous for so-called data compression. It says that if you are trying to upload a data of, let's just say, 100 MB, which contains some sort of a data that can be compressed, because for example, some things are linked to same sort of a company code, some things are linked to, let's just say, same person. I'll always create an index table. I'll compress it and maybe I'll keep it to, for example, let's just be optimistic. I'll just say 50 MB. I'll store it in the half space. But when it comes to media, okay, media ideally contains your binary data, and binary data cannot be compressed. Okay, what does it mean? That if you are saying I am uploading a zip file worth 2 GB, it will capture 2 GB of space on your DB as well. Plus your HANA is a in-memory database which tries to keep all the things that you are accessing into the memory. It means it's going to overload your in-memory thing, and you, the response that it should ideally give you on a faster way, because your data can be kept your data can be kept into a memory while the response is being generated. If any of such a high size media files are available in your memory, your RAM will be overloaded, right? So your performance might get degraded. Okay, so that's the reason this particular in-memory thing will also get hampered if you store the data which are of kind binary on your DB. Third one, the most important, which any organization will consider, is a cost-wise. Costing of HANA database is much higher compared to that of the other database. For example, if I consider any other database, HANA contains a good configuration. That's the reason their pricing are a bit higher. And if I even compare it with any third-party file storage, right? Third-party file storage. For example, if I talk about some Azure or anything which ideally simplest Google Drive, all these are kind of quite, let's just say, affordable compared to your HANA database. Okay, so these are quite affordable. So why would I store my files which are of higher size onto the DB? Rather, I can simply store those things onto some third-party cloud. And CAP also provides me those openness, right? I can easily pass on certain things directly onto my, let's just say, any of the third-party storage. I can consume those API quite easily. Okay, so this will ultimately give you the media capability, but in the session maybe follows, as we have started with the media entity, we are also going to do some sort of integration of it with that of the um, let's just say Azure Storage Explorer. Okay, that's what we are anyway going to learn. But first, let's just understand how these operations are anyway being done. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just simply try to make these things available in the form of a table right now. I'll just simply, just in order for you to understand, I'll just simply say CDS deploy to HANA. Okay, and I'll just try to also view these things in my Explorer, database Explorer. So we are pretty clear on how the things are going to get stored on my DB. Okay, I'll just simply go over here, and here I'll go back, and here maybe we have some controller DB, that is something we deployed. Here it is, right? I'll go with this service binding, and here I'll just check this data. I'll just copy this, go over here. Okay, and I'll just simply add a plus. I'll try to add the container, apply JSON, paste this, apply, and I'll just simply say this is my BTP BE controller. You can name it anything, okay, but I'm just making it in line with the project, so in future it's easy for us to reconcile. Okay, I'll just simply say tables, and here I see a table now for media file as well, and I see that okay, it generated a blob content for that. Blob content, it means it's going to store the binary data of it, and I can just simply view that as well. Okay, but as you can see, it's also anyway taking a much amount of time anyway for it to be loaded, even though it's empty, because it contains a blob kind of a data. Okay, now after this, what we are supposed to do is let's just try to upload some sort of a file to understand the operation of a media, right? Let's just see the thing in action, maybe I guess from the HTTP client itself, so we know how the things are going to work. Okay, so for example, any of the media file over here. Okay, let's just understand it from the JSON perspective, how a media operation can be performed. How a media operation can be performed. Let's just say I have an entity, right? So for example, I am saying I have an entity. I'll just simply say CDS watch profile hybrid. Okay, I could have get metadata. I could have got the get the data for this one. Even if I would like to enter some sort of a data, I can simply perform a post operation in anything, right? I can simply say, hey, I would like to post some data. and I'll simply say, hey, I would like to perform some post operation on this one, and I'll simply go by saying maybe this one, and maybe what's the name of the entity that we do have, media entity. So I'll just copy this one, media file. I can do that, right? Now, while you are doing that, what you are supposed to do is you are supposed to, let's just say, simply specify the content type of it, because each post operation ideally asks you, right, what are the data that you are trying to perform? What are the kind of data that you are trying to push? So when you are doing that, you have to specify the type. Now, for example, consider a scenario that I would like to enter an entity where my ID gets generated. That's first. On top of it, I am also willing to, let's just say, add some media content over here. On top of it, I am also willing to perform, for example, let's just say add some media files and the file name. So these two are string, but these are blob content, right? So I can pass these things into a JSON, but this thing cannot be passed into a JSON. It will become a complex type. Okay. So what I might do is I can simply say application.json. And if I am trying to pass something over here, I can simply pass only few things. So for example, I'll just simply say media type over here. I'll just simply say, hey, this media type which I'm passing is going to be PDF. And this thing which I'm going to do, which is this file name over here, it's going to be, for example, taste.pdf. Okay. So what the system will do is it will upload the JSON for this. Okay. So it uploaded some JSON for this, and maybe I can see that my type of this has been defined as a PDF. But point is the database explorer, if I just view right now, as you can see, it contains everything but the content, because I was only able to post the JSON data. Okay. Now, in order for me to send the media content, which is nothing but my PDF content, okay, I have to ultimately um, update my existing record. Okay, so I have to update the record posted with PDF content. This is what I have to perform. Okay, so what I'll do is I have to write again a put command on this one. Okay, and I'll write a put command in a way that this is the one. Okay, this is the operation, and maybe here I would like to update this particular record. So I'll just copy this over here. And here I would specify the name of the property, which is nothing but a content. And then I have to specify the content type, which is nothing but an application/PDF. Okay, and I have to specify the path of it. Now I'll need some PDF file for that as well. So do we have some file over here in the form of a PDF? This is a test one. Okay, it's some contains some logo. Let's just go with that. I'll just simply say I would like to import some sort of a file. Let's just say, where will I do that? So for example, let's just import it in this SRV folder. Test one, open this. So I uploaded this particular PDF file. So it's now available over here. In reality, or I can say while you are going to taste it via the Postman, we won't upload it in a local folder. Rather, we'll upload it via, let's just say, different controllers. But currently, just for us to understand the media transaction concept, we are going to update it over here, upload it over here. Now, what we are going to do is we are going to specify the path of it. So I'll just simply say this one, bracket, and you have to specify a space and then say, I'm currently in a taste folder, right? This taste folder has a parent called SRV. SRV has a file called taste1.pdf. Okay, and we can try updating this. So let's just say I'm trying to update this. So it just uploaded some sort of a content into this. It says 204. Let's just see if it did something. So as you can see, it uploaded this particular content over here with a media type application PDF. Okay, so we just got this information uploaded correctly over here. It updated your media type plus it updated this. But as you can see, it just performs some post operation over here. Then it has to do some put operation as well. In order for us to do these things in a single step, maybe V4 till now has not got much thing which can perform this operation in a single step. Rather, V2 over here has got a capability saying you can perform update of a media plus content upload in a single step. That's something which is doable when it comes to your let's just say OData V2. Currently, we are using OData V4. In OData V4, always you have to go via two steps. So if I think from a UI perspective, your UI controller should trigger two call back to back. One post call over here. This post call will return you the response with the ID of the file that got generated. Then UI file upload controller should trigger a put call followed by that. That's something that your UI should be doing. Now, in order for us to optimize that, let's just try to use the V2 proxy part of it. Okay, let's just simply say I would like to use OData V2 adapter proxy. We have used that OData V2 adapter proxy here. I'll just go over here. I'll just copy this path and I'll install this package. npm install. Okay, we installed this package and maybe there was one more file that we were supposed to add in your SRV folder server.js, right? We did that earlier. I'll just simply say server.js. Okay, so now it generated a proxy and maybe we can also perform some OData V2 operation. Let's just say CDS watch profile hybrid. Okay, it just generated some rewrite rule as well. So not only your V4 metadata that you are getting right now over here, okay, you can also get some V2 metadata. So for example, I'll just copy this, okay, and I'll just simply say get metadata in the form of a OData V2. But in order for us to have this V2 alternative of it, the signature will be that before this OData, we have to add a V2 over here. And let's see, are we able to get the V2 metadata as well? As we can see, it just generated a metadata. And do we see the OData version 2.0 somewhere? Yeah, here we see data service version 2.0. So it's a OData V2. Now we got that. Now we have to perform a media file upload. Okay, how we can do that? You can simply say that I would like to create a media, create some media file. For that, the simple procedure is you will go via post. Okay, you won't go via put. So what we'll do is like we have a post over here. I'll copy the same thing over here. We'll convert it into V2. Okay, after doing this, this particular media file should pass certain information. Okay, what are those? First thing you should be passing is that as you would like to upload the content of the data, I'll just simply say content type over here and I'll just simply say application PDF. So we are going to upload the media for sure. So we'll do this in this particular fashion. I'll copy this, okay, which is nothing but the path of it, and I'll pass it over here. Now, on top of it, we are also supposed to pass the name of the file. Okay, and we have specified content disposition, which says that, okay, this is how the content should be disposed. This content disposition is ideally captured in the parameter called slug. Okay, why a slug parameter? So you remember when you used to write a create stream in your gateway, your slug parameter used to be the parameter that you can pass as a kind of a textual kind of a data so that your two calls can be avoided. In your just single call you can upload those data. So that slug parameter that used to exist in your gateway services also exists over here as well. So what I'll do is I'll just simply go over here and I'll simply say that I would like to add some slug parameter here, and you will simply say my test PDF, for example, .pdf, for example. Okay, I just gave it a random name. but there is a put call. Maybe we wrote it at the wrong place. I'll just cut this and I'll add it over here. So there is a OData v2 call. Just for the post application PDF, there is a parameter that you're passing for the sake of a name. You specify, okay, let's just see, are we able to pass all the things? First one, ID going to get generated. Content of it, we also passed it over here. There is a media content. Another one is a media type. We are passing it in the form of a content type. Another one is a file name. We are passing it in the form of a slug. So mostly we have passed everything. Let's just try to upload this. I'll just simply say send. Okay, it, as you can see, it says that you have got this particular ID, your file got generated, application PDF file name, and your media source is available at this particular endpoint. Okay, now let's just view this. What it did do. I have a post call, your V4, I have generated a V2, it converted it into V4 automatically. After that, it triggered a follow on put call. So at any point in time, your media file upload requires two database calls. I can say two backend calls for sure. But as your OData v2 proxy has written some logic internally, the moment you pass these things, it generates this OData v2 call automatically rather than you passing it. Let's just go over here in the database explorer, refresh this. As you can see in the single go, system uploaded the file in the form of application PDF along with the name over here. So in the single backend call, the media got uploaded. Let's just see. I'll just copy this path over here and see whether I am able to download it. Let's just copy this media source and let's just try to paste it over here. Okay, yeah, maybe this local host anyway won't work over here. Rather, I have to specify. Let's just say, okay. Let's just say I might need to go back, refresh. Okay, I have got a media file over here, right? And I'll just go in this one. No, I'll go in OData v2 right now. So this is a path. My controller over here, dollar $metadata. Oh, sorry. Okay, I said my controller dollar $metadata. I'll just replace these things with this one. Copy this media file, go ahead and this one, enter. As you can see, it just downloaded some file. I'll just open this. As you can see, it just downloaded the file which I uploaded. What are the code changes that we did internally? Nothing. It's just 5 lines of code, but I can say my model is now capable of handling a media entity plus my let's just say controller or service over here is able to expose that as well. And thanks to that, we are able to taste the functionality. This is not a code, right? This is just a tasting skeleton. We just tried checking out whether my operation that I'm performing on the media are working the way expected. Okay, that's how simple it is. With only one drawback, saying the media is now getting uploaded onto the DB. We have to optimize it a bit. So maybe I guess going forward, we'll also learn how I can connect to my Azure storage, okay, via this particular BTP. Okay, that's something we will ultimately have in the session that follows. Anyone having any doubt on any of the things that we have covered so far on the virtual element, on the controller side, on action implementation, on media files, anything? Okay, either we have got too many things or maybe we are quite clear. Okay, so I'll take it as a no, saying we all are clear. So what I'll do is maybe I would like you guys to go through this thing, try out the media operation plus the virtual implementation at your own, because in next session we are going to connect to a Azure Storage Explorer, which will have kind of a flavor of consuming third-party Node.js API via your Node.js code, JavaScript code. Okay, that's what we are going to go towards. And as a part of which we'll perform database upload, media upload, media download, all into the Azure. and we'll see it in the action. Okay, that's the main idea. That's what we are going to implement in the next session. So we'll call it a day today if you don't have any doubt, and maybe I would like you guys to try out these things at your own before our next session. Okay, is that good?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Sumit,
Yeah.
is it chance
Yeah.
to share that project zip in a Git or anywhere? Any
Sorry, I
planning
guess
in future?
that's
Yeah,
as
any
per
planning?
policy. We can share
Okay,
the recording that you will have for the last time, but
okay,
we'll not share the code base, so you guys can try it out at your own.
got it, got it. Okay,
Okay, okay. So just try out at your own, because I think yes, I mean past few days as well. We are seeing maybe the moment you try out, you might end up in an error, but the moment you resolve, you are more clear on how the things are actually designed. Okay,
okay.
so that's what I would like you guys to try out. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. Then we'll see each other again maybe tomorrow. I think in next week, which is the New Year week, mostly we won't have any session. So we'll have a session on Saturday, Sunday. This one in that tomorrow, which is a Sunday as well. The following Saturday, Sunday, we won't have any session. I would like you guys to enjoy your 31st, and the week follows. We'll continue the way we are connecting right now. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice day. Bye bye.